Mr. Donny Lalonde, thank you very much for coming on to TheBoxingBar.com and welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here, and hello out there.
And let's go ahead and get to know you a little bit, Mr. Lalonde. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Kitchener, Ontario, and raised kind of all over the place. Because at 3, we moved across the country to the West Coast. Kitchener, Ontario is near Toronto, or let's say just north of New York. And where I grew up is just north of Seattle. So really, I was born in Ontario near the East Coast, but I was raised on the West Coast in Vancouver.
And what was it like being raised there in Canada?
Well, I loved it. I mean, that was back in the 60s and 70s, and it was a whole different world than it is now, and it was just a very unique, fun time. And somehow as a kid, I knew it was a really special and unique time, and I really enjoyed my childhood.
What were you like as a kid growing up?
Well, I was actually a pretty shy kid. We went to Catholic school, and I was a third child, so I had a bigger, stronger, older brother, kind of more dominant, and I had a sister, and her and I got along really well, and I had a younger brother, so I was kind of like a middle child who didn't really, make a whole lot of noise. I was just kind of like there. But I grew up in a housing project in East Vancouver for a while there, and I used to have to walk through the Protestants to have to get to the Catholic school, and that created a lot of tension, and ultimately I had to learn to fight to protect myself. And that's when I actually got into boxing. My mother brought me to a boxing gym when I was like 11, 1971, so that I could be sure to be able to protect myself so I could get to school. So I wasn't really at all a troublesome child or anything, but I had to learn to fight to protect myself.
And that was life outside of where you lived. It was probably a rough area there. What was it like at home? What were you guys like, at home? Were you guys close?
I mean, we were 4 kids that were very close together. My mother had the 4 of us on her own because my father figured a wife with 4 kids was too much for him to handle, so he took off when I was about 3. And so basically we were, in a pretty rough place. And we lived in a housing project. We lived barely getting by, of course. But, kids have a way of having a good time one way or another. I mean, we played football, my brothers and I. We played hockey. We played lacrosse. We just really got very involved in sports. And so, I mean, as kids, I knew we lived poor. I knew that a lot of the people did a lot better than us, and I didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was in a place I was meant to be, but I did feel like I had a lot of love within my family, and my brothers and I had a lot of fun, playing sports and stuff. But then at around 12, my mother got remarried to a sexually abusive guy and a physically abusive guy. Of course, she didn't know that when she married him. So I experienced the physical abuse aspect of him, and some other people had the other experiences. And so all of a sudden, at about 12, my life really took a turn for the worst. And by 14, I had saved up enough money by working instead of going to school to leave home, but I didn't leave home till the next year when I was 15.
Did you ever get in physical confrontations with your stepfather?
One time when he had her shoulders pinned to the ground with 2 of his knees and he was punching her in the face and she was unconscious, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I ran at him and tried to jump on him and stop him. He was a very strong guy, over 200 pounds, and I was a pretty small kid. So he just grabbed me and punched me. I flew against the wall and was knocked out. So that was the only time I confronted him that way. And then I left home at 15, as I mentioned, just to get away. And by the time I was 16, I'd saved up enough money to move my mom out of the house when he was out of town. So that was kind of how I did it. I just got out and then got her out, as opposed to fighting. I guess I used my defense and my movements more so than counter-punching, because the counter of the counter was too hard.
Well, very sorry to hear about that kind of stuff, and that happens all the time with a bunch of different boxers. What were you like as a student in school? Were you a pretty good student?
I really wasn't. And I stopped paying attention in school when this stuff started happening. And I just wanted to get out. As I mentioned, I was working instead of going to school. So I would literally work at a hotel at 13. Well, actually, I started working shoveling. Where we lived in northern BC, British Columbia, there was a record amount of snowfall that year, even still today. It was something like 30 feet or something. And so I would get $50 back then, 1971. I'd get $50 for every roof that I would shovel the snow off of in heavy rain and snowfalls because it would collapse roofs. So at that age, that was a lot of money at that age, I would get $50 and it would take me half a day to do a roof. And so I would either do one or two. If I could get away from school all day, I would, but if I had to do it for half a day, and I just started saving money instead of focusing on school. So really, my grade 7 teacher helped me through. My grade 8 teacher, my grade 8 French teacher gave me an A, the last A I got, and I really didn't deserve even probably a B. And he helped me cheat on my test to get through grade 8. And then because, they knew what was going on and just kind of supported, trying to help me. And then grade 9, I barely got through, and they made me do some work over the summer to pass me. And the only reason they really wanted to pass me is so I didn't have to repeat the year. And that's when I stopped. After grade 9, I just started working and thinking that I needed to get out of the house more than I needed to go to school another day.
And during all this time, where did you find time to go to the gym or to box?
Well, I didn't. I only boxed when I was 11 for about a year, and then we moved from Vancouver, where I was boxing, to up north in Stewart, BC, which is where he worked in mines, and so that's where the craziness started, was up in Stewart. And so I started playing hockey in Stewart, and I really, really got involved with hockey and took that very seriously, and I actually was looking to play professional hockey, but you need real structure in your life and a fair amount of money to have a meaningful hockey career as a young kid, so I didn't really have that support. So I just stopped sports altogether and started working and tried to find my way in life. And, back then, you got to remember, we're in the mid-'70s now, and experimentation of psychedelic drugs and stuff was one of the options. Sports was another option. I tried both. I loved them. I loved the boxing. I mean, the hockey and all the other stuff, the drugs. It was interesting. But it wasn't me. It wasn't like where I wanted to be in my life, and it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I figured that out pretty young, and just kind of went, okay, I want to do something. I saw some guys boxing on TV one day, and just told my brother, we were literally sitting there smoking a cigarette. We had a cigarette going. We were sharing a joint, and we had beers. And I'm 15 years old, I'm now 16 years old. And I said, look at this guy on TV, John. I mean, doesn't he look like he has dignity? Doesn't he look like he feels good about himself?
Yeah.
And he goes, what do you mean? Well, the guy in the corner, just look at him. He just looks freaking awesome. He looks really, really happy and proud and strong and confident. And he goes, yeah, so what does that mean to us? And I said, well, I want to feel about myself like he looks like he feels about himself. And he goes, yeah, how are you going to do that? And I said, I'm going to just start boxing and see if that helps, And he goes, okay, well, let's do it. So he started with me. We both started together and never turned back. Boxing and the people around boxing, the people in boxing, gave me the support and the confidence and the guidance I needed to rebuild myself from a very, sort of broken down psyche. Because when you're living in a very dysfunctional environment and you're sort of petrified in your living environment, it's hard to have a strong emotional sort of base. And so you really break down. So my brother and I just built ourselves back up, and boxing and the people around boxing were just, a saint to us. They're the ones that helped us get out of it. I hear so much in over my career. I was literally asked many times by sports writers, Donny, boxing can be a pretty rough game. There's a lot of really bad people in the game, and just wondering, why did you choose boxing? You seem like a pretty normal person. or they would say in some ways sort of meant something like that. And I always thought it was kind of funny, and I always said, I've had some different experiences with, let's say, authorities, let's say, political figures, churches. I mean, I've had some pretty weird experiences around industries that supposedly these are the good guys. I've never really had any bad experiences with people from boxing. I've only had positive experiences from people around boxing, and I've only had a lot of love and support from people around boxing. I've met a lot of crazy people and a lot of other businesses, so you can't really tell me that boxing is full of crazy, bad people. I know there's bad people. There's bad people in every business, but boxing doesn't stand alone in that game, that's for sure.
So in a way, it kind of guided you not just to become a good boxer and to learn the technique and the sweet science, but it kind of, I guess, nurtured you to become a young man as well.
Exactly. It gives you self-esteem, self-respect, respect for others, discipline, hard work ethic. I mean, boxing. It's funny. I did a speech the other day at a Rotary Club, and I was kind of struggling with what I was going to talk about because it was in kind of like a unique geographic location. And so, there's sensitivities to certain aspects of society, race, all these different things. But yet boxing, very much crosses all those lines. And so it was a little bit delicate. I had to be careful. But in the end, like what I got to was just trying and let people know that, the people talk about MMA and all that kind of stuff, UFC, this stuff nowadays, and how boxing is on a downturn. Well, guess what? So is society. Our society is, a mess. And the two correlate actually in a very interesting way, because if you look back in boxing's heyday from the 50s to the 70s like that, I mean, you had heroes that literally inspired positively and controversially, whether you say like Joe Louis or Muhammad Ali or many different people. Boxing was actually a very, very relevant thread in our society that kids weren't behaving properly, so you'd send them to a boxing gym, or in the Army or in the Navy they would have boxing as part of it, or in schools they had boxing. And people learned good, quality, old-fashioned values being around a boxing environment. And our country had those values, and we had discipline, and then the people leading were, they had to have been acting more responsibly towards the country because it was in a lot better shape. And unfortunately, we've gotten away from that, both as a society, and boxing is being diluted and broken down. And it's really unfortunate because it offers so much to individuals and so much to society in such a positive way. And unfortunately, it's being diluted a little bit and dropped down. But I believe boxing will make a comeback. As soon as somebody from North America is interesting enough and talented enough, people will get interested again. It's just that the Europeans and people from other countries, people we have a hard time pronouncing their names, so it's hard to really get enrolled in it, in their careers and in their lives. It's hard to relate to them. So in North America, as the sayings go, as goes heavyweight, so does go boxing. And I really believe that once we get a charismatic, dynamic, talented fighter again, hopefully they're going to be able to lift the sport back up. And the benefits of the sport will be reflected and experienced by society again.
And redeemed also. And there's like about 5 topics that you just spoke of that I could go, 100 questions with those. But of course, this one's going to be about you. What did you get into, or did you get into amateur boxing at all?
I tried to turn pro before I could fight before I'd had an amateur fight, because my big goal was to be professional world champion. Muhammad Ali really inspired me. Matthew Saad Muhammad was a great warrior. He inspired me. Roberto Duran was a big inspiration to me. So the amateurs never really was important to me that way. But the night I was supposed to turn pro, before having an amateur fight, Scott Ledoux fought a guy named Sylvester Wilder, who later Ring Magazine called the worst heavyweight of all time. And I guess because he was such a bum, the crowd, I was the walkout bout, and the crowd was so mad at the promoter. The promoter came in the dressing room as I was getting ready to go out for the walkout bout, and he goes, "Donny, if I stay in here for your fight, they're going to kill me. I got to get out of this place, the back door. This thing's over. You better go have yourself some amateur fights, and we'll take this up maybe in a year or two." So I almost did turn pro without an amateur fight, but it didn't happen. So I had 15 amateur fights. I was 11-4. I never really took it very seriously because I was distracted. I was playing hockey. I was working. I just wasn't really focused until I turned pro. Then I was really focused and really motivated, knowing that I had no room for error.
Your pro debut. What do you remember about that? What do you remember about being in the locker room before you went through the drapes for your very first night? What do you remember about that day?
I remember being scared to death. I remember when the referee waved the fight off in the second round, I remember looking around and thinking, okay, so who won? Because I didn't know why he was stopping it, because I was hurt or the other guy was hurt, because I was so exhausted, I guess, from nerves, And then while we're waiting for them to put our hand up in the air, the other guy looks at me. I can see he's pretty beat up. He looks at me and he goes, "Well, that must have been fun, eh?" He kind of laughed. I went, "Are you kidding? I was so exhausted. I didn't know why the ref was stopping it, or if it was for me or you." He laughed. It's just such a overwhelmingly intimidating thing to do, your first professional fight. At least it was for me.
And what was that difference like to not from the amateur to professional, to not have the headgear, to have the lighter gloves. Of course, without the headgear, you're going to get hit in the face a lot harder without the T-shirt and all that. What was the differences from amateur to professional to you in that fight?
I always liked that. I liked that part of it. I never wanted to wear a shirt or a headgear. In fact, after one pro fight, a guy from Canada named Ralph Racine was put into a coma by Gaetan Hart. And Tommy Hearns' stablemate, Helmer Kenty, had boxed Ralph Racine. And so they were, kind of like friends. And Kronk Jim was wanting to do something to raise some money for Ralph's family. And I overheard a conversation between the Winnipeg boxing promoter and Emmanuel Stewart. And the boxing promoter just kept saying, Manny, I get it. I understand. No, everybody here would love to see Tommy Hearns. He was 26-0, 25 knockouts, 3 months away from before he beat Pino Cuevas to become world champion. And he goes, but there's nobody crazy enough in this town to box Tommy Hearns. And I heard him say that, and I go over and I go, Tommy, because his name was Tommy Burns, the promoter. I go, what do you, I was trying to interrupt him. He goes, Donny, stop it. I'm talking to Emmanuel Stewart, Tommy Hearns' trainer, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'll box Tommy Hearns. He goes, I can't shut up. I said, Tommy, I will box Tommy Hearns. Tell him I will box. I said it loud enough that the other guy could hear him, Emmanuel Stewart. Tommy goes, Manny, I think I might have somebody crazy enough to box Tommy Hearns here. He goes, give me a minute. So he talked to him, and I go, yeah, let's do it. So I boxed Tommy after one pro fight. And I buckled Tommy's knees really bad. I mean, his butt hit the bottom rope, and he buckled my knees with a good right hand. And I was about 165 pounds, and he was about 155 at that time. And he had 14-ounce gloves on and a headgear, and I had 16-ounce gloves on and no headgear. But anyway, we boxed 4 very fast-paced rounds, and afterwards, people came up to me and just said, Donny, what are you doing? You've got to quit your job and take boxing seriously 100% because you have a future in this game. If you can box Tommy Hearns like you just did after one fight, you're in the wrong business doing anything but boxing. And I kind of felt that and knew that, but until you have that kind of an experience with someone that talented, obviously you don't really know. But so that day, the next day, I went into work, quit my job, and that was the last job I've had. I've only had one other job since then, since 1980.
Wow. Your fight with Willie Edwards, what do you remember about that fight?
A lot of things. First of all, a funny story that goes with it is just before it, a friend of mine had to come. I wanted some help. I was down in Indianapolis training for the boxing Marvin Johnson. It was a very tough guy to box, but of course it was great preparation for it. That was an NABF title fight, and I was promoting it, and I had to borrow money to promote it, so there was a lot of pressure on me to win this fight. It was on national television in Canada, so that added to the opportunity, of course. And I had Michael Spinks' camp, Don Majewski, come in, and they stated, and then we made an agreement that had I beat Willie Edwards, I got a shot at Michael Spinks. There was a lot on the line. So I asked a friend of mine if he'd come down to Indianapolis and help me train and just kind of be there for me. He said, yeah, but I can't really afford to do it, And I didn't have any money at the time, really, so I couldn't really afford to pay him. But I said, well, I'll take care of everything that I can and all that. And he goes, okay. So I'm going to come down there, but I'm going to, back then, you could have American Express traveler's checks where they looked the same, whether they're Canadian dollars or U.S. dollars, but there's a 20% difference in the dollar. He goes, I'm just going to bring a few traveler's checks so I don't have to pay the exchange and just save that money so it won't be so bad. And I was like, okay, no problem. So he gets down there and he goes, I gotta cash one of these checks. It's a real hassle sometimes. And I said, well, why don't we just cash them all in one day so we don't have to focus on that, so we can focus on the boxing. He goes, okay. So I drive him to a couple little places, cash a check, buy something, cash a check, buy something. And if they didn't notice the exchange difference, he got away with like $18 or something. So he did that a few times. And I had my money in the car, my money, had having nothing to do with that, in my car to pay the sparring partners and pay different things that I needed to pay at that time. That was my day to pay it. And some guy that he had bought a hamburger from thought he had stolen the checks because his driver's license had expired. So he phoned the police. Well, we get pulled over by the police, and they find my money under the seat, $600 to pay my bills, and think that's proceeds of a crime. They think this guy stole the checks and was trying to pawn stolen checks. And so they arrest us, put us in jail, and give us a 3-month date that we go to court in front of the judge 3 months later. And we had to stay there for 3 months because we're Canadian and we're a flight risk.
So you guys were charged with some kind of fraud, type of deal?
Yeah. And I said, I can't stay for 3 months. I got to fight in 10 days. It's a televised North American title fight. The guy goes, oh, your court date's in 3 months and you're not getting out of here, So I was on a Friday. And so I traded all the guys that were in my cell my food, because I wasn't going to eat prison food. It was just, I was already at that point learned a little bit about nutrition, and I was a vegetarian, and I ate really healthy, so I wasn't about to eat that. So I traded them my food for their juice. So I went on a juice fast, and I traded them my food for their phone time, because there was a payphone and you got to use it. And so for the whole weekend, what I did is I phoned people to try and raise money, get people to send me money down, because a friend of mine got me a lawyer, and the lawyer said, Donny, there's a brand new $20 million prison in Anderson, Indiana. If you can get yourself some money together, I guarantee I can negotiate a settlement. All these guys want is money. All right. So I got $6,000 sent down to my girlfriend. Different people lent me money. And that money sent down. So for 3 days, 10 days before my fight, North American title fight, I can't work out. I can't eat. I don't even know if I'm going to be having the fight. I've got the promotion on my way. My friend, who's still like a partner of mine, he was in Winnipeg holding off the media because they want to do all these interviews. And he's like, oh, well, Donny's in seclusion right now. He'll call you back at his convenient time. And I would use the prison payphone to call him and do the interviews and not let on, of course, that I'm in prison, because people would start going, oh, the fight's not on, so you wouldn't buy tickets, that kind of thing. So anyway, that was one of the things that happened around the time of the Everest fight. And then the fight itself, I remember being a great fight and feeling very comfortable and in the lead. And then all of a sudden, my lights were shut off. Well, 20 years later, believe it or not, 20 years later, a friend of mine, because remember I was the promoter, and I told a friend, I said, listen, I want you to work at Willie Edwards' corner. He only had one guy, Billy Goots in it, and Lindell Holmes. I said, they need like a bucket guy. I just be whatever he needs you to be. Get him food, get him water, get him whatever you need while he's here, and take care of him. So treat him like he's your friend, not mine. You're not my friend, And he goes, okay, Donny, okay, I'll do it. And so during the fight, between the 7th and 8th round, there's a stoppage, and he needs to switch a glove. It wasn't until 20 years later that my friend told me, while he switched the glove, they slipped on brass knuckles on his left hand.
You're kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and he saw them do it.
Did he ever admit to it or anything like that, or was that ever proven?
No, he never told me this for 20 years, my friend.
Wow.
Because, remember, we're from Canada, and we're like, all we know about black people is the stories we hear. And they're really mean, or from Detroit, it's the murder capital of the United States. You don't mess with these guys. So they saw him see them do that and gave him the signal, you say something, you're dead. They put their finger across their mouth and they put their finger across their throat. So he never said a word for over 20 years. One day he calls me, he goes, Donny, I have to have lunch with you. I just really desperately want to talk to you about something. So I do, and he goes, I got a confession to make, and he told me all about it. Anyway, the next round, Willie hits me with a left hook. And I went up and down 4 or 5 times from that same punch. It was like, I think 4 knockdowns from that same punch over the course of 2 rounds, because there's a minute break in between, and I didn't recover at all in between. And anyway, so the fight ended. I had no idea why, but he hit me with a shot that I've never felt anything like that. It was literally like, boxing Lennox Lewis when he was 220 some odd pounds and I was 170, and he hit me so hard, the hardest any boxer ever did. Still wasn't as hard as this guy hit me, nowhere near. So I know there was something weird about it. So anyway, those are my main thoughts about the Everest fight. But I do remember saying after the fight in the interview, I said, listen, this is a learning experience. Don't anybody think that Donny Lalonde's finished from this. I learned so much in this fight. I think I did very well against a very strong, credible, number 3 ranked in the world guy. I was number 10 at the time. And I said, don't worry, I learned enough from this, so I'm going to be back better than ever. And it wasn't long after that, Dave Wolf signed me, and that's when my career really took off.
And do you think there was a lot of that type of stuff in the 80s? You remember that case with that Collins guy, the one that fought in the undercard of Duran and Davey Moore? Where a similar incident happened like that. Do you think there was a lot of that type of stuff? And then now you're talking about this?
Well, back in the day, I remember driving around with the guys in cars because, I hung out with a guy named Pete Susans who's still around boxing, and he's a good friend of Bruce Trampler, who's a top ranks matchmaker. And, back in those days, Pete was just trying to help fill cars at different times like that. And, you'd be like, say, getting a replacement at the last minute for somebody who had fallen out, and the guy was like 20 pounds too heavy, but he was willing to try a fight. And so, we'd be standing behind him. and they're doing the weigh thing, and we're holding him up by the belt loops and taking some weight off, so he weighed the right amount of weight, kind of thing. And you look at both guys and like, something's not adding up here, but let's make the fight go on, so people would kind of turn their heads to that kind of stuff. I think back then, in general, in life, you could get away with a lot more than you can now, obviously. Nowadays, there's a camera in every angle, and there's a rule for everything, and it's just a different world. I'm sure back then a whole lot more went on than does now, and on to that type of society we had then too, right?
Did you think maybe something similar like that happened during that Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor first fight?
I mean, obviously that little brown bottle had something in it besides water. So, I'm sure my feeling has always been something happened there. Now, that being said, I really respected Aaron Pryor as a fighter. He was a great champion. I don't care. It doesn't matter what happened in that fight. This guy was an unbelievably great fighter. But one of my heroes was Alexis Arguello, so I did have a bit of a prejudice to that one. And I mean, I would say, given straight up that night, I don't know that Pryor would have had enough to do it, but there was something in there that kept his energy much higher than a normal human being. I mean, Arguello nailed him with shots that, anybody else would have gone down, and Pryor just looked at him and didn't even blink. So was he really that great of a puncher? Was he on something that sort of transcended the physical, helped him transcend the physical? Who knows? We'll never know.
That's true. And during this time in the mid '80s here that we're talking about, like when you signed with Dave, was that about the time when you got trainer Teddy Atlas on your side?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I met with Dave and we talked about who the right trainer should be. I mean, I think I had met Teddy in Gleason's before that, and Teddy really thought Dave was a good choice for me. But where I made the choice to get Dave was I actually went and saw Mike Trainer first, and hoping that he could manage me. And Mike suggested Dave Wolf because he had just signed Sean O'Sullivan and said him and Ray agreed that they wouldn't take on any other fighters. They're going to really focus on Sean. So he said, I recommend Dave Wolf as the next best guy. And I went into the gym in Gleason's in New York looking for Dave, trying to find somebody who knew where Dave lives or whatever like that. Or Mike might even give me the contact, but I was in Gleason's. And Teddy supported that by saying, he trained Donny Poole at the time, who Dave also managed. So Teddy also supported that I go with Dave. So Dave took me on. I mean, it wasn't me hiring him, and it was him being willing to take me because I was unproven compared to him. And Dave suggested, that I work with Teddy. So, it was November of '85 that I started working with Teddy, and we finished working together October of '86 year.
What was it like working with Teddy Atlas? Did you learn anything that you in your prior experience didn't know or didn't have in your arsenal?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I definitely learned stuff from Teddy. I mean, Teddy definitely is a good trainer. But back then, I remember he was a young kid. He was probably 20 years old, so he probably is a better trainer now. He's probably more knowledgeable now. But even then, I mean, Teddy had a lot to offer and a lot to show me. But what ended up happening with Teddy is, first of all, I had a lot of injuries. I mentioned earlier my shoulder, but I also had a lot of other injuries, my hands, my knees, my neck. I had migraines. I had all kinds of injuries. In fact, at the time I was with Teddy, the specialist of each specific injury told me I had career-ending injuries, and I had 6 of them at the same time. So I was a wreck physically. So first of all, to comment on the Teddy time, I was physically not healthy. And Teddy is the kind of guy that really believes in, like, very kind of, I'm going to say the example of kind of militaristic, very tough. You got to, stand this way and shake my hand hard and firm and look me in the eye and be a man and, fight through it. If you got a problem, like you did with Michael Moore with the phone, here, you want to tell your son that you're too afraid to get in there and mix it up or whatever he said, he's this kind of mentality. And I was much more of a free spirit. I came from the 60s and the 70s, and I was a free spirit. I wasn't this kind of guy. So Teddy and I just clashed. We just clashed as people. I mean, we were respectful enough to each other and kind enough to each other and, all that. But Teddy and my personalities, we just had a personality conflict. And so ultimately, I was going backwards. In spite of what Teddy may or may not have known, I was going backwards. And Dave always talks to me about it. He goes, what's the matter? And I just say, I don't know. I just can't relate to this guy. It's not working for me. This relationship doesn't work. And he goes, yeah, I've noticed that. So eventually Dave, at that point, just said, you know what, Donny? He goes, I'm suggesting that we change trainers. And I said, thank you. I've been wanting to say that for a long time. He goes, no, I've heard you kind of say it, but not really say it. And so I said, yeah. And so we unilaterally agreed that it was best for me to move on, which history proved it was.
the Eddie Davis fight. How do you remember getting that call to fight for the WBC light heavyweight title, your dream fight, probably what your goal was, at the beginning of your career?
Right. Well, remember, I was number 1 in the world, and Eddie was number 2 at the time, and Michael Spinks moved up. So it wasn't like really I got a call. It was more like it happened. It unfolded in front of us. And yeah, I mean, when Dave told me, you got to start, really, really, really getting healthy because you're going to be fighting for a world title. I think he said before the Hampshire fight, you win this fight, and we're going to fight for the world title because Spinks is going to give up his belt. And so it wasn't kind of so much like a one-moment thing. It was more or less over time. In fact, we trained really hard for about 10 months for that fight, with Hampshire being in the middle of it and part of that process in the preparation to fight Davis. And so, no, I mean, that's the dream of a lifetime of any fighter, to become world champion. And I felt very confident. I felt like very prepared, very confident. I just had a 12-round war with Hampshire in the Garden in New York on television, and it was a sensational fight, and it was a great fight. It was a close fight. The first 5 rounds, when I look at it back on tape now, I get to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth round. Like, how the heck did I win this fight? It looks like he's winning every round. So, and he did win about the first 5 rounds. And it was a very good fight. It was a good comeback by me. It was a good overall fight for me. And so I went into the fight with a lot of confidence. But that being said, a couple of days before the fight, I guess the reality really caught up with me. And I got so sick. I literally had to sit on my bed because that's as far away from the bathroom as I could get, because from both ends I was just like sick. In fact, I left the room after a while because I had to go get some water. And Dave, we were in Trinidad, and I saw Dave in the hallway. I was hoping not to see him. He goes, "Donny, you're whiter than your T-shirt. What's the matter with you?" I said, "Dave, I've been really sick for a couple of days. I don't know what's the matter. I just really, really, really am throwing up. I'm really weak. I don't know what's wrong." He goes, "Well, we're canceling this fight." I'm like, "No way. No, I'll be fine. I need some coconuts. I need some stuff for the electrolytes. I need to get some hydration. That's all I need." So, I ended up, and that was all just nerves. It was all just psychology and nerves. I'm pretty sure that or the lobster I had every day for about a month before the fight, because we were in Trinidad and I never had the money to have a lobster in my life. So I thought, well, if I can get free lobster every day, I'm going to have one. But anyway, so it was something getting me sick. And so I was, pretty nervous then going into the fight because I know what I had just been through. And Davis, he had gone 15 rounds with Michael Spinks, and so this is not a guy that you can count on getting rid of early. So one thing I did expect was a long fight, and then I was weakened, so I was a little intimidated. But that was, to me, that fight and then the Stewart fight were my best 2 fights. And that fight has to go down as it, because, again, I mean, he had fought Michael Spinks and did very well against him. He had fought Dwight Braxton. He had fought so many great fighters and handled himself very, very well. And, I mean, as the record shows, I destroyed the guy in less than 3 minutes. It was a miracle he got in the first round, lasted 20 seconds in the second. So, I mean, that was a fantasy come true. I mean, to really... As I was walking down the stairs, I'll never forget it, Tommy Gallagher grabbed my head, put his mouth right to my ear because it was so loud in there, and he goes, "Donny Lalonde, you are the M and F," and Tommy, if you know, WBC light heavyweight champion of the world. No one will ever be able to take this away from you. Be freaking proud of yourself. Yeah, so that's what I remember about the Davis fight. It was just the greatest moment of my life, and I hit him so hard. So perfect. It was like everything you always train for, that one moment that you dream of it happening at the right time, and it just did.
What was it like when your name was announced as a winner and the new WBC light heavyweight champion? What did that particular moment feel like for you?
Well, I'll tell you a little story about what happened before it quickly, and you'll understand what it felt like, because every day of training camp for that fight, which is 6 weeks in Kutcher's in upstate New York, there was a lake outside of our training camp. Every day I would go there and, you can call it meditate or pray. For me, it was more of a meditation. And just sort of like letting your mind go, try not to attach to the thoughts, because so much goes through them. But the one thing that kept coming up to me was emotion and tears. And I cried every day of training camp, not because I was afraid of anything, not because of anything you would think it would normally be, but I was so overwhelmed with what's going to happen if I'm actually the champion of the world. Do I really deserve Donny Lalonde, that little boy hiding under beds, hiding in closets, coming from this background? I'm going to be the light heavyweight champion of the world. It was so overwhelming to me to think that this dream I've always had, and this the fighting through all the injuries, the fighting through all the ups and downs, and the no promoters were behind me. I had to promote myself, train myself, manage myself for the first all those years of my career. All these things flash through in my head, and I'm thinking, wow. I mean, anyway, that was the most overwhelming part. It was not losing that fight; it was winning that fight, and how important and relevant that was to me, because I gave up my great job. I gave up so many things and sacrificed so many parts of my body. So much of my life was focused on boxing that I was, 27 years old with no other experience in my life, no education, no other experience in my life that I could really draw on financially. So I put everything I had, all my eggs in one basket, boxing, and here it was. So it was enormous. And so, of course, when they said that, you can't even imagine. I mean, it's like the blood drains out of your body, and you feel like ice cold because you just can't even believe you're alive. It's just the most spectacular thing in the world.
You go on and you go up in the ranks, and of course, you get the big fight that you've always wanted, the dream fight. What do you remember about getting the call that you were going to be fighting Sugar Ray Leonard? How do you remember getting that notice?
Well, actually, Tommy Gallagher. So what ended up happening when I left Teddy is I started working with Tommy and Bobby Cassidy. So Bobby was really my trainer more so, and it was Tommy's gym, and he had a lot of guys in there, and he had a lot going on in his life. So he was kind of like the co-trainer, and Bobby was the lead guy that I worked with, at least in my mind. It was Tommy, in fact, and I think really, in retrospect, looking back over the years, I've really come to the point where basically I realized Tommy was there more helping Dave put the Leonard thing together than he was as my trainer. Even though when I fought Leonard, Bobby had to take vacation for a couple of years less a day due to some past stuff that caught up to him. And so Tommy became my chief trainer. Like after Teddy, we went Hamshow, Davis, Stewart. That was a really good run of very relevant wins. And it was Bobby who really gave me what I needed, what I was missing from Teddy, what I had lacked in my earlier stages of learning. Bobby put all that together. Bobby, and so I really credit Bobby Cassidy with having helped me become a champion from a training perspective. And then Tommy, though, was very involved from the side of helping behind the scenes Dave put the fight together with Leonard. And just a year and a month or so before the Leonard fight, maybe even a year and 2 months before, at the gym with the Queens Boys Club, Tommy's gym, Tommy said, "Donny, I need to talk to you. Let's go for a walk." So we went for a walk, and he goes, "Would you fight Sugar Ray Leonard for $1 million?" And I laughed. I didn't even have a world title fight yet. We were in training for one, or just before training camp for that. And I laughed. I said, "Tommy, I'd fight Sugar Ray Leonard for nothing. I mean, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. I mean, I'm in this thing to experience and become the best I can be. So I would fight Sugar Ray Leonard for nothing." He says, "Never say that again." He goes, "But so you would fight him for $1 million?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Good, because we're going to get more than that." I went, "Wow, what are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, we got you lined up for a world title fight. You do that, you beat that on national television, then we're going to have you another television fight. If you can beat the next guy, we've got Ray Leonard." And I go, "Ray Leonard, he's not even fighting. He just fought Hager and he retired again." And they go, "Yeah, no, don't worry, I'm working on it. This thing's going to happen." And so I knew long in advance that the Leonard thing was in the works, and it became more and more and more apparent, the different meetings we had with different people, including the WBC and all that, to line it up to be for both titles and everything. So, of course, I was thrilled for that. And, I had 3 goals in my boxing career. One, I wanted to be world champion. The other was I wanted to become financially independent. And the third one was I was hoping to meet the girl of my dreams. So I didn't think I had the capacity to do it unless I was a champion. Maybe then I would have, maybe some girl would be interested. Well, right around that time. So in that year, I won the world title. I made the money with the Leonard fight. And 3 weeks before the Leonard fight, I met my wife, who's still my wife today.
What do you remember about that Leonard fight? I mean, everybody, to this day, you can still watch it on TV. So obviously there was a lot of hype about it. Did he live up to that expectation that everybody had of what Sugar Ray Leonard really was?
Well, first, let's be fair. I mean, it was later in Ray's career. So I didn't fight Ray Leonard that fought the first Duran fight or the Benitez fight. I can clearly acknowledge that I didn't fight 147-pound Sugar Ray Leonard. That being said, he was good enough to have just beaten Marvin Hagler, so it's not like he was a slouch. And after that, he beat Hearns and he beat Duran. So, I mean, Leonard could fight when we fought. And yes, Sugar Ray Leonard is Sugar Ray Leonard because that's who he is, because he could fight. I remember in the fight, the first 4 rounds, he barely laid a glove on me. And see, I learned boxing by boxing in the gym against guys like Marvin Johnson. And I ran Barkley, and I boxed hundreds of rounds together in New York. I boxed some really tough, good old school fighters, millions of rounds, because I knew I didn't have the amateur background, so I thought I was going to make it up in the gym by learning in the gym. And so people didn't realize the background I had and the comfort I had with old school boxing. And Sugar Ray was old school, new school, and everything in between. I mean, this guy was a master in there. So I was very comfortable in the ring with Sugar Ray Leonard, and I was very comfortable going into that fight. I mean, I literally, when I said on the front of Ring Magazine, when they quote, Sugar Ray is out of his mind, I literally used to tell Dave all the time before the fight, Dave, this fight isn't happening. Ray's going to wake up one morning and just go, what am I doing? I'm fighting a light heavyweight, a guy who can punch. I mean, I don't care if he wins like Mike Weaver and John Tate. You can win 14 rounds in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, but all he has to do is hit you once and it's over. Why would you fight a guy like that, especially out of your weight class? So I really thought the fight would end. As a matter of fact, in the dressing room, I fell asleep listening to some Bob Dylan music. Bob was in the dressing room with me, and I passed out, and Dave woke me up, and he go, I was dressed, I was ready, I'd done my warm-up, so I was just lying down to have a little rest, and I just kind of like passed out, like just kind of dozed off, and Dave gives me a little shake. He goes, Donny, I go, what? And he goes, are you sleeping? I said, yeah. He goes, well, wake up. It's time to get up. Ray's in the ring. The fight's happening. I said, what? And he goes, yeah, Ray's already going to the ring, so get up. You're next. He goes, he's not going to back out. I think he's going to make it to the ring. I went, okay, it's on. And I was so excited because I honestly didn't believe until the very minute we were going into the ring that fight was going to happen. I literally thought it was an easy fight. And with no disrespect to Ray at all when I say that, but I was a very hard puncher, very strong. I took a very good punch. How is this little guy, old guy, 32 years old, overweight? I mean, he's naturally 147. Here he is, 155. I'm a nutcase. I'm thinking that's heavy. I'm thinking 32 years old, and I'm thinking he can't fight. Because back in those days, lighter weight classes weren't fight over 30 years old. If you remember, back then, I mean, so I'm thinking he's old, he's overweight, he's slow. What is this guy doing? All I have to do is hit him once. This is over. And so I really thought it was an easy fight. And the first 4 rounds went exactly how I expected them to. And when he went down, the mistake that happened to me was the exact same thing that happened in my mind when I fought Willie Edwards. 4th round, I knocked Edwards down. 4th round, I knocked Leonard down. As I went to the neutral corner in both fights, a thought went through my mind, like just that little voice that you hear, and it just said, I didn't hit him clean. As soon as I hit him clean, this fight's over. And in both fights, I kind of stopped my fight and started waiting for him to make a mistake and just knock him out. And all of a sudden, that little edge I had was gone. And Ray realized that my rhythm and everything had changed, and he all of a sudden got more confident, and he started doing the old rolling the shoulders and shaking and jiving and doing this and doing that, and he started controlling the fight, and I started following him, and it took me a few rounds to readjust again and get my head back straight. And if you remember the fight, like in the 8th round and the 9th round, the first half, the first 2 minutes of the 2 minutes and 23 seconds that lasted or something, I was literally hitting him pillar to post. Not the first 30 seconds of that, but the next minute and a half, I was literally hitting him pillar to post. I'm looking at the ref thinking, what do you want me to do to this guy? I mean, I'm just killing this guy. I want you to stop the fight. I actually was looking at Richard, wondering why he wasn't stopping the fight. And when I did that, Ray looked at Richard, he looked at me, he looked back at Richard, and then he looked back at me, and you could see him do that on the tape. And then he just, slightly, if you're looking for it, you can actually see him do that. And then he stepped in and threw a punch and then caught me. And I went down and I got up and I looked at him, and I literally, I don't know if you see it on the tape on the angle, I remember in my mind smiling and looking and shrugging my shoulders and going, I can't even believe this. You got me. Because 2 minutes, I a minute earlier, I was hoping the ref would stop it so I don't hurt the guy, and now all of a sudden, my legs are wobbly, I'm picking myself up off the ground, and I'm going, how the heck did this happen? What they call that show, was interviewing me afterwards, and they asked me some generic question about the fight, and I went, God damn, I can't believe I lost that fight. I actually said all those swear words right on Entertainment Tonight, because I literally just couldn't even believe that I lost the fight. I mean, I was just shocked.
Would you say he had a lot of pop to his punch, or did he just throw you off your game because you were so overconfident thinking you were just going to whoop him?
He didn't throw me off my game. I threw myself off my game. I knocked him. The first 4 rounds, I had him cut. I had him hurt. I mean, he couldn't hit me. I was hitting him.
You guys didn't even look like you guys should be in the same ring, actually.
Right, and so it was me who threw myself off my game. And I mean, what I give Ray Leonard most credit for, which most people don't realize about Ray Leonard, is how tough he was. I mean, I hit him with shots. He's told me many times since then, Donny, you hit me with shots. Every time you hit me, it hurt. I mean, I was hurt the whole fight, he says. He tells me. He goes, every time you hit me, it hurt. He goes, so many times I was hurt during that fight. And I knew that, So I never did ever feel like that fight was out of my hands, unfortunately, because had I maybe taken it a little bit more sort of like with a little more respect, maybe I wouldn't have been so cavalier from the fifth round on. Maybe I would have, hey, this is Sugar Ray Leonard. Don't make a mistake. Stay focused. Stay on your game plan. And, well, this is nothing. I mean, I've got to hit the guy. As soon as I hit him clean again, this is over. And I just changed my mind frame, and Ray somehow picked up on that. And that's the great fighter he is. I mean, he's incredibly tough, mentally tough, physically tough. And then, of course, he was a genius in how he would find his way around a ring and finesse a ring and walk you into things and
the ring psychology. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah, he was brilliant in that. That's why he's one of the greats.
And you know what? I mean, you were doing stuff to him that not even in that fight before with Marvin Hagler. I mean, Marvin Hagler couldn't find him obviously, as much as you did. And I think in the first few rounds, I really thought it was even going to be a mismatch. Until he started coming on in the last 2-3 rounds, but. I mean, it was a pretty good fight. I mean, like I say, they still show it on TV all the time.
Yep. Well, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Would you say, or would you think at all that the race thing had a lot to do with marketing also at that time? You being a white fighter against a black fighter, just like people had seen years earlier with Jerry Cooney and, Larry Holmes. Do you think that had some kind of factor also, like you're saying, for a marketing strategy for the promoters?
Absolutely. There's no question that marketing was part of it, and the white card was played. I mean, mainly in the sense that, and rightfully so, because there weren't a lot of great white fighters, and the ones that were around, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, Barry McGuigan, Matthew Hilton, these were exciting fighters. So there weren't a lot of white champions, but the ones that there were very exciting and dynamic fighters. So I think it really brought a lot of interest both to the sport and, of course, to a fight of the magnitude of a guy like Ray Leonard. It's really unfortunate that the boxing experts at the time weren't truly experts, because had they, really realized, Mustafa Hamsho, Eddie Davis, Leslie Stewart, these were real fighters. These were great fighters. I mean, before I fought Leslie Stewart, they were talking about him fighting Tyson. Before I fought Hamsho, he had done great things with Hagler and stuff, but he was on like a comeback role. And Eddie Davis was considered way too experienced. And all you have to do is read all the magazine articles before our fight. Lalonde is amateurish. He's unathletic. He's uncoordinated. He has no left hand. He can't fight at all. This fight's ridiculous. He has no business being in there. The only reason he's in there is because he's white. And Dave Wolf's a great manager, and he's got him in there. I mean, that's what people were saying about me before I fought Davis. That was even after Hamsho. And they were still saying the same kind of thing after the Davis fight. Oh, he's an old man. That's what happened, blah, blah, blah. Well, why wasn't he old a year earlier when he fought, Michael Spinks? But all of a sudden he was an old man in one day. So, I think it's really unfortunate, because had the boxing community of experts really known what they were talking about, they would have looked more into my career and more into who I was, and not just read old press clippings, and they would have realized how great a fight we had on our hands, and that fight would have been much bigger than it actually was. But anyway, as it is, it is.
And you were talking about that there wasn't too many, white fighters at that time. My guest of last week was considered to be a white fighter with soul. Actually, he was your opponent a few fights up, Bobby Ches. I had him on last week. He said that he used to be considered to be the white fighter with some soul. What do you remember about getting that fight with Bobby Ches?
Well, I remember really being happy to have it because I tried to get Bobby to give me a shot when he was light heavyweight champion, and he fought Willie Edwards. When they announced the Edwards fight, I went to the press conference and called Bobby out, and of course nobody knew who I was at the time, so I don't blame him for not responding. But it did bother me that he never took me seriously enough to give me even a look, not even a conversation. So I was really happy to get the opportunity to fight Bobby, and unfortunately, actually, in the training camp for that fight, I literally broke my arm. And what would happen is I had a really good right hand, so the sparring partners would lift their elbow up to lift their forearm up to try and block my forearm, so my right hand wouldn't connect to them, because they had a really difficult time stopping my right hand from connecting. But if they could stop my forearm from advancing, they could prevent a clean connection. And so I kept saying to my manager, geez, my forearm is really, really sore. I mean, it's purple, as you can see. It's swollen. It was like huge. And he was like, well, we better go get it checked. I said, no, we don't need to get checked. I said, whatever it is, if it's bad, they're going to want to stop the fight. If it's not so bad, it doesn't matter. So either way, let's just go through it and we'll figure it out later. I had an x-ray later, and of course it was broken. So anyway, I went into the Ches fight not 100%, and I went into the Ches fight after about the first minute unconscious because Bobby was smart enough. We had guys in our camp, we had guys in their camp, and Bobby, the word from them, their guys watching me was, he's going to throw the right hand, and when he throws it, he's going to bring it back low. So just catch that right hand with your right hand, put it in front of your face, and then throw the left hook over top. And we knew that they knew that to do that. But foolishly, unfortunately, within the first minute of the fight, I threw a lazy right hand, pulled it down on my way back. Bobby timed it perfectly, hit me with a great left hook. And, we had no idea. When they announced that Bobby and I were fighting for his cruiserweight title fight, people said, geez, Donny, he's quite a bit heavier than you. Do you really think you should fight a guy because you're only 180 pounds? He's like 200. I went, yeah, but he's still Bobby Ches. He can't be a bigger guy. I mean, how do you go from 160 to 200 pounds? He must be fat. Well, about 5 days before the fight, guys saw him in a pair of shorts in Vegas running, trying to sweat off weight because he was still struggling with the weight. And the guy said, no, this guy's not fat. He's like a brick shithouse. Bobby Ches is in great shape for this fight. They said, I don't know how he did it, but he's very big and very strong. And I went, wow, I never thought about that. Obviously, he did something to get bigger. I mean, I don't even think it's humanly possible to gain that much weight, because remember, at 160, he was a strong guy. How do you go 40 pounds more naturally and be able to fight? I never even thought of this kind of thing until that moment. And I went, oh my God, I guess I'm in with a 200-pounder. A 160-pounder is not 200. I just didn't believe it could be done properly, but it doesn't have to be done properly. And I wasn't thinking that way. So anyway, back then we weren't thinking about strength or weight-enhancing substances in the sport, whereas lately it's been more prevalent. So I realized then that Bobby had done something to become a much bigger, stronger person, and the fight to me, when I look at the fight, if you start from the second round on, I think it can go either way. If you start from the first round and you see I got annihilated with that shot, it looks like I'm running the rest of the fight as opposed to boxing. And our strategy was to box him because he was so strong. So I kept going back to the corner in between rounds. I'd say, so how am I doing? Did I win that round? I think I won, right? And they'd be like, yeah, Don, you're doing great. Don't worry. You're right on schedule. You're doing just what we're trying to do. We're just outboxing him. Don't worry. Don't do anything crazy. Just keep boxing him. But I think because of the knockdown, the judges probably perceived my strategy and my style to be more of survival than boxing, and I was unorthodox and awkward, so I probably didn't look like it was smooth boxing, type thing. But anyway, so that punch in the first round, And you have these things in boxing. You can get hit by King Kong, and it doesn't shake you, and then you get hit by a jab, and you can't see. You see three different guys for 10 minutes. Bobby hit me with a left hook that still today, I don't remember anything about that fight till the fifth round. And in the fifth round, I remember looking at him and seeing him and going, my God, that's Bobby Chen. And then I heard all the people, and I went, wow, there's people here. Oh, my God, I'm fighting Bobby Ches. Awesome. And so then I just started fighting again. But apparently, so I was really, really hurt by that punch. And I did well in those rounds. They call, boxing, when you're out on your feet. You go back to, what you did every day, which is sparring and the habits you had and what you learned, you unconsciously keep or subconsciously keep. So I did really well unconsciously. But anyway, so it was a really interesting fight for me. And when I lost the decision, I accepted it, but I honestly didn't think it was a fair decision. I thought it was way widespread, and I thought that, as always fighters probably do, I thought you could have easily given that to me also. So I didn't feel I did bad in that fight at all, and I just wanted to get my arm better and then continue again.
And then after that particular fight, you take a layoff of about 3.5 years. You come back, you fight about 4 fights within about a year and a half. You won 3 of them and then got a draw on 1. After that, take a layoff, and you came back about 3.5 years later again. Were you kind of fed up already at that point with boxing? Was it kind of something you were just doing? And
first of all, as you probably know by being this close to the game, when you're so hungry that you would rather die than lose, those are the guys who are going to become champions, generally speaking. And that was me when I won the world title. After winning the world title, making the money, and meeting the girl of my dreams, I only boxed because I enjoyed it and for fun. I didn't need the money. I loved boxing. I still today, honestly, and I say this all the time, I'll be lying there and literally think a whole scenario as to why and how I can make a comeback now. And then I'll remember at the end of my little stupid dream that I'm putting together that I have a damaged eye from boxing, and I'm 52 years old, and I don't need to be boxing anymore. But I love the game. I love this. I love doing it. I love sparring. I miss sparring and being in the actual ring, the boxing part of it, more than anything in my whole life and more than anything by far. So I was burnt out of boxing around the time of the Leonard fight because I had done everything I needed to do and I wanted to hang him up and move on. But any other time I fought after that, or put it this way, any other time I didn't fight after that, the times in between were purely for practical, logical reasons that I wasn't fighting. One was in the Leonard fight, my larynx was crushed. So for a while after that fight, I didn't fight. My larynx was crushed. And so the doctors all said, you better not ever fight again because you've only got half the larynx. If you get hit there again, you're dead. And so that stopped me for a couple of years. And then after the Ches fight, again, I just didn't need the money and stuff. I had 2 young kids. My wife was like, Donny, what are you doing? Why don't you just hang out at home with the kids and let's, get on with our life. So a couple of years went by before I started doing it again, and I got restless, and I did it again. And as you said, the Kevin Pompey fight, it ended up being a draw, and I was like, what? I had a draw with Kevin Pompey? But I was in a car accident on the way to the fight, and I was actually still in shock. And I was in the dressing room, and they said, Donny, it's time to go out in the ring. Get ready. The commission told me, I said, listen, guys, can you put somebody else out there? Because I'm literally still quivering from this accident. I guess I'm in shock still. And they're like, no, you're on the schedule to be on right now. We can't change the card. The other guys aren't ready. You either get out there or you get suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission. So I went out, but I wasn't right for the fight at all in any way. And then after that, I was just kind of like, I was working, so that's the other job I had. I was working for Interbox in Quebec. They are in Montreal. They had hired me to do some work there. And I just wanted to get back in the game, so I started working with them and then sparring with the guys, and that's how I got going again. So I stopped because it just didn't make sense for me to be doing it. I was, anyway. And then in 2001, actually, I started fighting again because our IRS froze all my bank accounts and all my assets and said, Donny, you owe us $500,000. And I said, and I looked at why the logic of why they said that. I had like $6.4 million in net worth at the time, and I said I 100% disagree, and I will take this to appeals court. And they said, well, you're welcome to do that, but this is our was our position, and until we settle this, you're not having your assets back because you can just hide them and not pay for it, type thing. And so
they had them on a freeze. You mean kind of like a freeze?
They had them frozen. I had to sell my cars to keep living. I had Rolls, Mercedes, 2 Mercedes trucks, Jag. I had cars. I had 3 different houses, multi-million houses. I had money. I lived like a guy who had money, and so they froze everything, took everything they could. But I still had things I could sell for $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. So I fought them. It cost me $80,000 and took a year, and I won. With the claim they made, I actually won. But then they changed it. They said, okay, maybe you don't owe us $500,000. But $300,000 of the loans that we wanted you to not be able to write off, which is why they justified that owing the money, they said they originated in the States. You got to go out to Sam for those and appeal it in the States. And I just told my accountant and my lawyer, I said, I'm not going through this again. I've been a year going through this. I'm just going to get all in my life and start doing something else. And then about a year went by, and I asked my accountant, I said, we better just appeal that because I got to get my money back. This is stupid. And my properties, I lost a couple of them in court because they had small more, like a $300,000 mortgage on a $1.5 million property. But if you don't pay it, you lose it. So I ended up losing a couple of properties and a lot of money's worth. I said, okay, I got to go appeal this thing. And the second time, my lawyer goes, it's too late. You only had 1 year to do it, and it's just past a year. You can't appeal it. So I actually negotiated a deal with the tax man that if I made a comeback, I said I can get Roy Jones in the ring, and I'll probably get $3 to $5 million for that fight. If you just, you guys take 20% up to $1 million instead of the $300,000 you say, oh yeah, you take 20% up to $3 million. Up to $1 million, and we got a deal. But if I get an injury or something, I'm 41 years old, it's a wash. And so they agreed to that. That was the deal I made with them. Well, a week before the fight, I got a career-ending injury in my eye. But I was the promoter of the Hill fight. It was on national TV, ESPN, and I knew with that injury, it was the end of my career. I was only a week away from the fight. Mine was swollen shut with a cut on it, but through natural means, I can get rid of cuts really quickly and swelling. So I said to Freddie Roach, I said, Freddie, don't worry about the cut and the swelling, but there's something that happened to my eye. It felt like a nail hit me in the eye, and the pain went right down my back. And he goes, whoa, okay, well, let's look at it when you get your eye, swelling down so we can look inside the eye. Well, that didn't happen until 2 days before the fight. When the fight started, I realized because I hadn't been able to use the eye until then. When the fight started, I realized when things moved, I saw traces. So I saw just multiple Virgil Hills flying around the ring the whole fight, and I had no depth perception. So I didn't know if he was a foot away from me or 3 feet away from me. So as you could see in that fight, I was looking the whole fight, trying to figure out where he was, trying to figure out how close he was, how far he was. If he left, he was right. And if you look at that fight, it probably looks like I'm old and I had no reflexes, but it was I just couldn't see him. In the 7th round, I nailed him, great shot. And after the fight, he goes, Donny, what happened in the 7th round? Why didn't you finish me? I said, what do you mean finish you? And he goes, well, I was really hurt. I didn't even know my own name. I said, I know. I saw, for a second, caught a glimpse of your eyes. I knew you were out on your feet. I said, but that was the only second I saw you in the fight. And he goes, what do you mean? I explained to him about my eyesight. He goes, oh, my God, I can't believe it. He goes, I wish I would have known it before. He goes, because I was so afraid because you hit so freaking hard every time you hit me. And I didn't want you to come close, but if I'd known you were that hurt, I could have taken a chance.
Virgil was trying to redeem himself, too, from his knockout loss to Roy Jones, right?
Right. Well, actually, at the time, he was like the interim, or he was the actual champion in recess, and some other guy was the champion or something like that at cruiserweight. So we fought. He was over 200 pounds also, and I was like 182 pounds. And but again, I'm thinking, it's Virgil Hill. He's still Virgil Hill. What's the difference? Well, geez, he too. He didn't do it like Bobby did. Virgil was naturally a bigger guy than Bobby, but Virgil was very big and strong at 200 pounds at that point in his career. And he, like you say, he was still working hard to establish the fact that he was still around. He was still championship material. He was still looking to make some good money, and I was so happy to have a chance to get him in the ring, and I had Freddie Roach, his former trainer, as my trainer. I was feeling fantastic in camp. I felt I was fighting better and punching harder than ever, and I was boxing James Toney every day in the gym. Ornelius, I can't remember the guy's name. Ornelius, one of the 2 brothers. Those 2 brothers that were number 1, number 2 in the world super middleweight at the time. From La Habra. I boxed those guys all the time during that camp. All kinds of really good fighters. And so I felt great, and Freddie had me in perfect shape for that, but without being able to see, it made it difficult. And so I was that close anyway to getting the Jones fight, because had I beat Verge, then I would have gotten Jones, was the talk and the conversations going on, and that would have been my money. But see, what happened is I made a mistake in telling one person about my eye injury before the fight. I didn't see anybody except this one guy, and I kind of ran into the guy. And he said, "Donny, what's the matter? I thought you're fighting. What's the matter with your eye?" And I explained it. I said, "But please don't say anything, at least till after the fight, because people, if they find out that I've got a bad eye going into the fight, they won't let me fight." And so he said, "Okay, I won't say anything till after." Well, right afterwards, he wrote about this injury I had. The tax man read that. They tracked it down on the internet. This is what they told me afterwards. And so they said they disallowed some action that had been done just before the fight to do with training expense. They said I was in default and forced me into bankruptcy. So I actually fought that time around. Partly was for financial reasons. The truth of it is I loved it so much. It wasn't like I was doing it begrudgingly. I was doing it still because I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I would still fight now. I still think of like before Bernard Hopkins just lost his belt, because at that comeback, I met him at the Playboy Mansion at an event. And he goes, "Donny, what are you doing? What are you doing to your name, to your career? You're 42 years old and you're still fighting." He goes, "God, you had such a great name and you did so well in your career. I mean, you're gonna ruin all of that. Why don't you get out of the game?" I said, "Brian, I love it. How can I get out of something I love doing so much?" He goes, "Oh, God, I'm sorry to hear that." He goes, "I really wish you wouldn't hang in so long and then end up, ruining your name." And then he ends up with my old belt at 47 years old.
Yeah. So you do still feel like that fire sometimes when you do watch boxing and watch these guys like Bernard Hopkins and stuff like that. You still feel that fire inside still burning.
Totally. I absolutely 100%. If it made any logical sense whatsoever, if I was even physically healthy, like as far as my eye goes or anything, I'm probably stupid enough that I would fight now. Because I just love it. I love it. I've never once for a moment lost the passion and love for the sport. The physical sport of it, watching of it, participating at any level.
You know what? I read some of Teddy Atlas's book, which is a top-selling book, and he brought up something about you. Him going over, and he was so mad at you for letting him go as a trainer, and he went looking for you, with the gun. And if you would have happened to be there at that moment when he went knocking and looking for you, that he would have shot and killed you. Did you know about that, or do you have thoughts on that when you heard about that?
I wrote a rebuttal to that, to Fight News, because that's where I read about it. I didn't know anything about it until I had read about it. And somebody actually contacted me. Shannon Briggs, a couple of other people I talked to about it at the time, they sort of reached out and connected with me and shared some stories that they had with them. Donny Poole told me, he goes, "Donny, the only reason I'm alive today is because I caught out of the corner of my eye Teddy running at me with a butcher knife from behind. He was going to kill me from behind." And so I knew Teddy, again, when he was young, 28 years old, he was young, and he was, I guess, trying to create an image or something. So he was always talking tough, and he would get in fights in the gym. He told me a story about a pipe wrench that he got hit with from one of the trainers from behind. I think he was fighting Hector Camacho in the gym at the time. Teddy was a real hot-tempered person who got into a lot of confrontation. So when I did hear that, I wasn't overly surprised. What I was surprised at was the fact that he acknowledged that, and he actually spoke about it like it was almost like he was proud of himself for what he did. I mean, I don't know. I just, honestly, and I know this sounds crazy because Teddy Atlas is known as like a knowledgeable boxing guy, and he's a commentator, and he's a good guy because he does work with the charities and, all that stuff. I know Teddy has a really good side to him. But all I'm saying about Teddy is he's got to be somewhat imbalanced. Because how do you literally, prepare to kill somebody, premeditate a murder, and then talk about it like it's a normal thing, like in a justified way? In his story, he also talks about a whole bunch of other crap about me, that totally false lies, stories about certain instances that he says happened that 100% absolutely never did. Say between Chris Reed and I in the ring sparring, or me with some other guy, how I was afraid of something, or I mean, I boxed Lennox freaking Lewis at 170 pounds. I boxed Leroy Caldwell. I don't know if you know this guy is, but he looked like Mike Weaver. He was 240 pounds. He fought Ron Lyle, George Foreman. He fought all these guys. He wasn't a great fighter, but he was huge and freaking punched so hard, mainly with his jab. He had one known as one of the best jabs in the game at the time. He just had a great whip of a jab. He almost knocked my head off one time. He hit me. I mean, I was afraid of nobody in the ring. I loved boxing. Never did I walk into a boxing ring afraid of my opponent. And there's certain stories that Teddy's told in his book that are just fabricated lies. I mean, they're just stuff that he pulled out of the air somehow to justify why he did what he did or whatever. I don't know. So anyway, as far as Teddy Atlas goes, I don't care really one bit about the guy other than I actually hope for him to be mentally stable and that he would be, heal his insanity and hopefully he has a healthy life for him and his family and all that kind of stuff, because he's got to be nuts. I mean, people get fired all the time in life and business. Killing them, there's no way to try and justify that. There's no way to try and make that sound sane and anything other than nuts, in my opinion.
Well, you got to remember, he put a gun to Mike Tyson's head, and that's why he was let go by Customato as well.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. I mean, this guy is not completely stable. So what can I say other than, I hope the best for the guy, and I hope that he, gets some help, I guess.
And now that it's all said and done, Donny, how does Donny Lalonde, the Golden Boy, how do you want to be remembered in boxing?
I hope people remember me for whatever it is in my career that inspired them in any way positive. I tried to reflect positive. That's where the Golden Boy came from. I wanted to be back in the days in the 70s and early 80s. Boxing was known as a sport with the bad guys involved, and it's all, the guys wearing black, and that's why I wore white. And that's why I had blonde hair. I wanted to be the clean-cut kid, and I just wanted people to see somebody positive in the sport and something positive. And when I won the world title, Lisa Steinberg was beaten to death a few blocks from my house. She was 4 years old. Her parents, one was a child's book editor, one was a lawyer. And all along, I always thought that it was just people that lived dysfunctionally. And when you read all the stories in the New York papers about how many people in our society actually beat, torture, rape, I mean, the way we treat children is just unbelievable. So I thought, okay, everybody in boxing says I'm going to get destroyed by Eddie Davis. But they'll probably ask me after the fight something. So if they do, I'm going to at least, say something relevant to these kids. And so, fortunately, I got more than a minute because I won the fight, and that's the first thing I talked about. And from that, I became the national spokesman for the public awareness of prevention of child abuse for the United States government, and then for the Canadian government, and two foundations I had put together to raise awareness. And I raised good enough awareness that the Prime Minister of Canada came up to me at a charity event and said, Donny, we really don't have a mandate or a budget for helping children that are abused. It would really be more beneficial to us if you tone down your public awareness campaign, because it's putting a lot of pressure on us that we're not in a position to take care of. And I just went, wow. That was a big, big, big eye-opener for me. But it also showed me that what we were doing was being effective, and it was raising a very relevant issue that needed to be dealt with. So I'm proud of a few things that happened in my career, and I'm proud of the end record I had. Would I love to have not lost to Bobby Chez? Would I love to have not lost to, or not drew with Kevin Pompey, or lost to Sugar Leonard? That fight I felt was so in the bag, so in my hand. Even the Willie Edwards fight. I had him down, I had him cut, I had him hurt. I was winning that fight. So I really never felt like anybody really beat me. You know what I mean? They may have outscored me. I'm not saying that nobody won the fight, but all I'm saying is I was never in a boxing ring with anybody that I never belonged in a ring with, that I wasn't capable of being in the same ring with and compete on their level. So I think I had an honorable, respectful enough career, and I tried to be something positive in the time I was there, and hopefully that's what people remember. But, in the end, like a guy like Teddy Atlas, you can't really hold your feeling about your life and your career by what other people think. You just have to be at peace with it or not. And I'm very much at peace. The only thing that I would like about boxing is to be able to do more of it.
Well, I know I will always remember you, and I will always praise you for doing what you did in probably one of my favorite eras in boxing, the 80s. We can't really talk about the 80s without talking about, people like you guys. You brought on, a good fight, and a fight that, like I said, they still show to this day with probably the guy that's considered to be the golden child of the 80s, which was Sugar Ray Leonard. And you have nothing to be ashamed of there. Thank you very much for being here on TheBoxingBar.com. Thank you for all the time you've taken to talk to us, and just thank you for being yourself, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and good luck with your site. And all boxing fans out there, keep the faith. And this is the greatest sport in the world. And all this other stuff, MMA, all that stuff, it is what it is. Let it be what it is. But don't forget, the boxing is the thread of our culture. It's very relevant in our life, and there's no sport that takes more from a man, or no sport that a man can give more to society through, in my mind, than boxing. So let's keep fighting for that sport to be strong and succeed and sustain through this time that we're struggling in North America. Have someone we can identify with. Somebody's going to come along. We're going to be able to jump on his bandwagon and enjoy the sport in a more personal way sooner rather than later. So hang in there.
Amen to that, and God bless you, sir. Thank you very much, Donny. Thank you very much.
Thank you.